Meow. Wow, look at that red kite. Hear this? I'm drinking water. Dog. Hi, welcome back to another episode where I'm critiquing designs that have been sent in to me, hundreds of them. So let's sit out here in the garden and I'll be going through a few of these. I'm pretty relaxed here, all set to go. And we'll try to get through a few of them and make a good critique out of them. So today we'll start out with Vladi Petrov. Vladi's from Sofia, Bulgaria. He's been based in the US for many, many years, since he was a young child. And he's actually going to Art Center College of Design in Los Angeles. We're going to concentrate first of all on his project, which is the Acura Vision GT. Now, we'll probably never see this on the road. It's a GranTurismo concept, so obviously it's don't expect to be seeing something like this on the road too soon, which makes it all the more interesting because now I can really see how creative somebody can be when they have no limits in terms of making something that has to work, has to be packaged properly and according to regulations. So it's always fun to watch what's out there, what's coming along from the young talented designers. And Vladi's one of the good ones. I can tell here already from his presentation technique. It's interesting for me because it kind of goes against the grain of what I believe in design, which is, I'm always speaking about these, the very designery words about sensuality and purity. And Vladi's got a great take on another side of the design profession where it's all about almost a technical design in the sense that he's not looking for that essential beauty of a product. It's more about stamping, about pressing things into shape, about hard edges, about sharp edges. It's not the kind of car you want to wash by hand, but it does have its clientele and its appeal if it's done properly, which means the proportions are still considered, the dynamicness of design is considered. And from the side view, man, this is, it's very extreme. It's extreme in every way, yet it still has that desirable impact when you look at it because it's so outrageous and well proportioned. I'll never tire of saying that word simply because it's probably the most important word in design. He's got an extreme package here where the driver is about as low as you could actually imagine sitting. So his heels are actually above his hip point. So we call the hip point the H point. And when you have your heel point above it, you're really sitting like in a Formula One car. It is comfortable, believe it or not, to sit in that position because your weight is rested over a larger part of your body. So it's not a position where you would be absolutely uncomfortable. It's much quite the opposite. So it's very graphic. I have to say that in terms of what we consider beautiful automotive design, there's not much of the beauty in there. It's kind of like if we were to design an insect. You know, you have very, very minimal structure. It's almost like no skin, just pure bones. Well, not that he's designed the bones, but he's designed basically minimal surfacing on this, but it holds together very well. It's really got that looking like it's moving when it's stopped kind of dynamic on it. Very good, Vladi, on being able to design something that really is extreme. I mean, you've considered obviously the front aerodynamics with the Acura symbol logo to kind of match that front wing that you have in the front to match the logo. That's a nice touch. Super clean design. Hard to say that there's anything wrong with it because what I'm looking for instead of basically is something wrong is more for the impact. And it looks exactly like I think what it's intended to be as a high-speed race car. Your wheels might look a little bit outdated for the design of this vehicle overall, but the wheels are still pretty modern. It's just that I see the vehicle to be much more modern than the wheels. You would almost want to enclose the wheels so that you have no turbulence at all around that area on the outside of the wheels. So for your downforce on a vehicle that operates at these high speeds, you absolutely want this thing to stay on the ground. So I'm hoping that in some way or other, if I could flip it upside down and look at it, that the bottom of the car would resemble the top side of a wing for aero purposes. So to add a few pointers here, how do you get in and out of the vehicle? What does it actually look like when you're sitting in the vehicle? When you're designing a vehicle like this, you'll probably want to design it so that the viewer, the person engaged in the game has a viewpoint from inside the vehicle, which would be the same as the viewing angle of the pilot. And so you would want to see what that looks like from inside. So there aren't any sketches here showing what the view angle is and what you would see from the inside of the vehicle. Kind of missed that, but I think it would be a real good addition. I think this vehicle racing at night would be interesting also, sort of your 24-hour type racing. So what does this vehicle look like on the road at night at speed? Which is all coming down to how the light signature is on the vehicle. You want to see how it's illuminated at night. Perhaps you would want to integrate some kind of active arrow that shows it working at different speeds, because cars at different speeds need different types of aerodynamic influences on them. So if I was playing Gran Turismo and I came across this car in one of the menus to select, I think this would be probably the one I would select of all the ones I've seen so far in Gran Turismo. It's hot, it's fast, it's different, it's challenging, which is what it should be. It's got absolutely that often oversaid wow factor, but it really does. So Vladi, if they don't take this car for Gran Turismo, you can always pitch it to Wipeout. They'll definitely be interested in this one. Just take the wheels off and you'll be all set with the perfect vehicle. So thanks, Vladi, for your submission. Great vehicle, perfect vehicle for another universe. And let's move on to the next one. So let's have a good look here at Armin's work. Armin has sent in his interpretation of a Lamborghini. Armin, first of all, congratulations. I know you're probably at the early stages of learning about car design, and you've actually gone out on a limb and tried to actually push it into a 3D perspective drawing. And congratulations on that, because like I said earlier, a lot of us start out with pure side views. It's the easiest way to draw a car when you're starting out. And it gets very difficult once you start getting into the 3D aspect of designing. It's so easy to get the car out of alignment. A 3D object typically is very difficult to draw in perspective. And when it's a car, there's so many details that if you get one detail wrong, it'll make the car look like it's had an accident. And when you're drawing in perspective, the ellipses, the wheels, are the hardest thing at the beginning to get right. And typically the rear wheel in a perspective like this is going to be a smaller, thinner ellipse than the one in the front. And the one in the front can vary because you can say the wheels are turning or not. But most often you're going to see an ellipse that is narrow at the back and wider at the front. So if I begin with that and try to correct a little bit what you've got here, I would open up the front wheel, the front ellipse a little bit, with the understanding that it's in perspective. And I'll show you something in more detail in a moment. But the rear wheel, again, a little bit thinner. And don't push it too far back, because that's a common mistake when you draw cars in this view. But you can see already the ellipse is much smaller than the front ellipse. Now, the angle of the ellipse, you have two angles on the ellipse, or two actually guidelines or axes as we call them, which are at right angles to each other. One through the long axis, or the major axis, one through the minor axis. Now the minor axis has to go to the vanishing point. So it looks like your vanishing point is there and heading there. So we're going to end up with a vanishing point where these two lines eventually coincide. And that determines the angle of the ellipse, whether it's more turned this way or that way. It's not going to be straight up and down. It's always going to be leading on the minor axis to the vanishing point. The A-pillar is a consequence of the angle of the windscreen. So I know it's a Lamborghini. Basically, it's about as flat as they come. But they also tilt inwards. So remember that your A-pillar, kind of difficult at the beginning to get right because it's a feeling, but make sure that it's got a little bit of lean towards the inside of the vehicle, because that's what tumble home is. Tumble home is this actual angle of the glass here relative to the side. You're going to have that. So again, when we start working on the side here and you have shapes like that where you have an intake, that door cut line is going to help you to accentuate the surface and to read it much easier. So if you're coming out, you know that surface for the intake is going to go in underneath. So where that door line will then line up is here, not here, for example. So you want to show the depth of that offset there. So that comes down, and then it'll come out here where you have that little offset, and then it'll come back down in, typically out where you have the highlight or the light catcher, and then back in where the rocker is. That kind of corrects a little bit the proportions and the perspective that you're using. I would obviously set this car on the ground, so if you have a source of light coming from this angle, you want to see the shadow coming off from the car, so you would have the bottom lines a bit darker, the shadow of the car coming there, a bit of the rear wheel here coming out, maybe a hint of a shadow there, maybe not, but that would start to plant the car. One of the tricks with the Lamborghini that you can do is you can actually pull the bottom of the windscreen or the windshield fairly forward. Lamborghinis tend to have the engine in the back, modern ones at least, and that means that you don't have a lot of need for front area here for the engine, obviously. So you would, on a Lamborghini, because the rake or the angle of the windscreen to the bonnet or to the hood is fairly steep, you can always pull that angle or that intersection point of the windscreen to the bonnet or to the hood pretty forward compared to other cars. You almost get a straight line going through there. So see, that right there is starting to help it look more Lamborghini-esque. Lamborghini like to use these very sharply creased, very sharply defined, triangular, for example, as you have here, type headlight graphics. And when you design headlamps, especially for a company like Lamborghini, you want to bring in something typical Lamborghini, obviously, but in a fresher way. So you've done it very well here. It's just probably, in my taste, a little bit too split up. I'd probably try to integrate them in a little way that still maintains that unexpectedness of Lamborghini, but maybe it could turn into its own kind of what we call a chevron. You want the front of a Lamborghini to be almost like something that is going to bite you. It doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be aggressive. So you want to add a bit of sharpness to the front of a Lamborghini, and you want it to be almost pointed, almost arrow-like. So it's getting very aggressive. The mouth is very large, very menacing. If I had time, I would block it in with a solid color just to give you a much more impression of darkness, of menacing darkness. But you can start to see that the design is starting to become much more Lamborghini-esque. So on most supercars, you're going to have a big engine in the back, mid-engine, and you're going to want to feed a lot of air into that engine. So don't make your intakes on this side here look very weak and small. You want to give a lot of emphasis to the side intakes, especially on a Lamborghini. So what you want to do is open up that opening pretty large. I mean, the more air, the more horsepower you can get in out of the engine. So make that opening very distinctive, and this line here, which reflects the surface going in, you want to emphasize that too in terms of depth, so that you can build that ledge up and get the air to look like it's moving very deeply into the car. So this drawing here is the perfect next step compared to the first drawing we showed in the first episode, where we just had a side view. What we've been able to see here is how we can turn that side view around slightly and give you a bit more, communicate a bit more information on the design by looking at it not only from the side, but also from the front. We call those three-quarter views, and that's a very good view to learn to draw, because it gives you a lot more information in one drawing than just having a very simple side view. Much more difficult to master, because everything starts to come together in terms of perspectives and requirements to get the car to look absolutely correct. But he's done a very good job initially to set the car up like this. So the next step after a drawing like this would then start to be, how do you render, how do you shade the actual vehicle? Once you master the perspectives, get the car to look good as a line drawing, working just with a pen and freehand. Thanks very much, Armin, for submitting your sketch here. Keep pushing, keep practicing, and I'm sure you'll see a lot of advancement. The more you sketch, the more you practice on these tips that I've spoken about here today. Thanks very much, everybody. I know I promised 3 videos today. As you can see, the weather's turned. So we're gonna have to wrap it up, take the equipment inside, and I promise you I'll make up for it next time. And thanks everybody for submitting the design. I'm working through them as fast as I can. And again, I'll see you soon in the next episode.